I'll do number one.
Okay.
I didn't submit it. Oh, go ahead.
Well, as everybody knows, we're doing the deep soil sampling, and we have 200 samples in the program, and there was a lot of concern whether that's adequate, and we would like it to be more. So we plugged in another 100 samples. We took the bid. We just bid out the work for the first 200 samples, so we just scaled it out, came up with $150,000 to do another 100 samples.
Questions on that for Jim?
So you guys don't have these as sheets. There's a kind of a general, this blue one just has kind of some general information. So you don't have the same reference sheet. You're searching for it. Imagine it.
The email they got, explain that.
Just in case. No, I don't remember somebody else.
Question, Jim. So what this number is that you're asking for additional funds based on what you would see as additional participation. What if we don't get that participation?
Well, then we don't.
Then we don't spend the money,
No.
and that money's open for other projects?
Your project?
No, I'm not saying. I'm just, we're all talking about scalable or contingencies.
Sure, obviously.
We're going to pay Stu for finding abandoned wells. Any other questions on that? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Jim?
I want to make sure I'm reading this right now. On the irrigation system design and efficiency and all that.
Just a second, Jim, I'm sorry. We're just talking about the deep soil sampling request. You don't have anything in front of you that talks about the deep soil sampling. Could you hold your thought just a minute? Okay, thank you. Anything about that first one? Okay, moving into the next one, which really are kind of a pair, number 2 and number 3, Jim. And then this is where that'll come in.
Okay, I see how you're doing this. Not
That's-
slow.
Number 2 is irrigation water management workshops, and we're just looking for an opportunity for more education to the landowners, and we would try to tag on to existing grower meetings. In the wintertime, they have a lot of meetings. Chemical companies sponsor meetings for certification of their spray applicator's license, or we could try to get into a tree fruits convention or whatever, but it would just be an opportunity to talk about this project generally, the GWMA project generally. Would be to get in the word about deep soil sampling and irrigation efficiencies generally. And we have, actually we thought it would cost about $7,000 for a 2-year program, not each year, so it's actually a little less.
Questions for Jim?
Aren't there agencies that already do that? Like the Conservation District and what is it, RCS or whatever it is, they get their irrigation equipment stuff through and stuff? I mean, doesn't somebody else have part of that pie already?
Well, they do, but it's generally a case of people going to them, and we have found that if you really want to reach the farmers, you go to where they're at, not try to invite them to come to where you're at. And the conservation districts are not necessarily pitching this process on specifically, and we want to put the focus on pitching what the GWMA is doing, get people signed up for deep soil sampling.
You're going to fish them in.
Pardon me?
You're going to kind of fish them in
Yeah.
and set the hook. Yeah, I just want to make sure I ain't paying for the same process in 2 different places. Okay.
Other questions? Okay, regulatory work, I think is next, isn't it?
I have one more.
Well,
One
I'm sorry.
more.
I'm fine for Jim.
Yeah, I thought you talked about it. Did you? Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm concerned that you've cut out my request already. You won't even talk about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you talked about it.
Our third third one is a mobile lab, and we would have a technician, a technician, and perhaps a summer intern, or at least one or two people that would be on in a vehicle with equipment to go to farms, talk to farmers, help them both with nutrient management, irrigation, water management, and to try to encourage them to do a better job on their nutrient management, and encourage them to start using soil moisture measuring equipment, learn how to understand what that equipment tells them. And it, in some ways, well, in a lot of ways, like some of the other proposals, this is still a work in progress. Actually, in our discussion today, we cut it down to $350,000 over 2 years. And it's probably would end up being less, because we're trying to figure out what's the proper incentive. Actually, we started out just what would it cost to do soil monitoring, both for nutrients and soil moisture. And so we just kind of build it out as everything would be provided, just to make it a totally educational process. And as we work through it, we're decided it's much more effective as an incentive program, so the landowner has some obligation there too. So the cost could go down even less than what we've budgeted, but we think this would be a very, very effective tool to be used in conjunction with deep soil sampling. So.
Can I, quick clarification, one of the things that the other GWMAs that in the past that have put a lot of their money into is this cost sharing for irrigation management. And actually, it's not obvious, but this is embedded inside of this, and so it's over half of that budget to do that, to cost share for irrigation management services, soil moisture monitoring and stuff like that.
Questions for either Troy or Jim?
Hopefully I don't get run out of the room for this, but I'm kind of losing track of sequencing here. This project seems to me like it presupposes some results. There probably could be better education for irrigation and nutrient management, but part of the question that we're wrestling here is, do we have a problem? Is that problem historic, or is it current? And what are the causes? And we don't really know the answer to that yet. And so I'm trying to figure out how this project sequenced in with data that we don't have yet.
Well, I think that's a valid concern, but I think you would find that there's a lot of people around this room have come to the conclusion that the issue or the problem comes from the irrigated ag sector, and so we wanted to be proactive. It's also true that we talked today in our meeting about having the data first, and we will have a data set collected before this would be implemented in any event. And we've even talked about whether it would best be put off until 2016. I tend to be proactive and like to get things started.
Sure.
But that could be if we need to take a look at, don't have it updated to know for sure where we're going and why.
I mean, I don't question the validity of this. I'm just looking
Yeah.
at from a
Yeah.
sequence standpoint.
We're not going to run you out of the room just for that concern.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think about here. You run me out of the room for many other things, probably for the night. So.
Steve?
Has there been any thought about coordination with the current suppliers? I see potentially a little conflict unless they're brought in up front. Lyle, Simplot, Hush, those guys, they need to know what's going on. They already have some of this stuff going on. Do their own companies that they provide to the growers. To what extent, I don't know.
Yeah, we did talk about that, and that is a good point. I guess I'd answer that two ways. We might be seeking out people who don't avail themselves of those services, number one, but number two, we're not necessarily going to replace what they do. We might just provide, I say we, this program could provide financial incentive for those landowners who rather than use those services. So we're not intentionally cutting any existing service out of
Increase their business, it's not competing for the business.
Right. Trying to urge them to use them instead of.
One last thought would be that they can help promote this program if you brought them in.
Sure.
Front and got them to support it.
Stu, you had a question?
Low-hanging fruit, there are a number of progressive and larger growers that on their own are utilizing a private service or have in-house talent. That's not our target. Our target is a couple of tiers down. And this is the hammer that drives the nitrate. So it's really important. So we can keep this focus on those that do not or have not or cannot avail themselves of that private service. And we're also helping ourselves because we're not competing with a private enterprise. We don't want to make any enemies out here at Ag. We want everybody to be our friend. I think just how it's tailored is the key. That there's potentially this could be a really big piece of what we end up doing.
Yeah, and that's a good point because we're not trying to prejudge anything, but I think there's probably a sector of the ag community that could use this help more than others. Yeah. And so we're trying to target that area.
Any other, Dan?
I like your idea of trying to be proactive on some of these things. And I remember when Lori presented us with the Yakima Valley history, that you made a comment at that time that you thought that it would be really nice to have a very detailed history on irrigated ag in the valley. Did you ever give any thought to perhaps budgeting some funds for that? In regards to being proactive, I mean, there has been some substantial changes in our irrigation and land management practices over the last 70, 80 years, and perhaps that would help guide your group in the thinking of how they're going to approach these issues.
It ties back into the historic versus current issue, which is a big issue.
Well, obviously I'm fascinated with the history of irrigation in the valley, but there might be some challenge in making everyone understand the connection to the nitrate issues, but if our work group can certainly we can take that under advisement and see what we can do with that. I think that's a good suggestion. It's an area we hadn't thought about.
It was actually your suggestion, but
That's why